A few months ago, I went on a quick road trip over to Vancouver Island. As usual, I took along my sketchbook. There's my inevitable waiting in line for the ferry sketch. But I also wanted to do some stitching while I was there. And I considered taking along some stuff to make a scene that looks something like this, which is a very typical Vancouver Island scene. But I really wanted to leave myself open to what I might find along the way. So in the end, I just stuck a bunch of random bits into a little pouch and decided to do some stitching without much of a plan while I was there. I've got all kinds of things in this little pouch. Some cloth that I've dyed with some annatto or achiote. It's a seed from Central America. This one was marigold and indigo. And this piece here, these are flowers that have been hammered into a piece of cloth. In the end, I didn't choose any of those. I decided to work on this piece that I started last winter. You may remember this project that I started back last winter where I was just stitching snowflakes down here and there, and I worked on it for quite a bit in December, and then I lost interest, and it's just been sitting in my bag now for quite a while. So I was really glad to find a way to get back to this piece. And I started out by doing just basic running stitches, swapping out colors of thread that I had in my little bag there. As the piece progressed, it really started to remind me of the Northern Lights. And little did I know at the time that we would be treated to such a wonderful display of the Northern Lights. Photos courtesy of my daughter. Now, I'm glad that I didn't prejudge what I was going to see on this trip, because as we were driving around the island, although there were plenty of water views, the overwhelming impression that I had was of moss. There was moss everywhere, and definitely when you were walking in the forest, but really just everywhere you looked, there was moss growing just in such abundance. And we have moss here in Vancouver. We have a lot of moss here in Vancouver, but nothing like this, just covering everything, and you just get the sense of the age and the majesty of the forest there. And I really wanted to capture that somehow in my stitching. But it wasn't until almost the very end of our trip that I finally had the inspiration for what I wanted to make. We stopped at a Korean grocery store one day, which is not something you really expect to find in small towns in BC, but nonetheless, there it was. And it had this beautiful traditional Korean textile hanging in the window that I just loved. And that gave me an idea for how to document my trip in stitch. So when I got home to my full stash of thread and fabrics, I started working on this piece. And I also wanted to make a piece that would remind me of those beautiful cherry blossoms that I look forward to so much every spring here on the West Coast. I just really love them. My favorite time is when they start to look like they're raining snow. And then this happened. And I also wanted to include a reference to the snowflakes and the Northern Lights, because indeed there was snow on the mountain passes as we were driving across the island. And I stitched those three bits together. And then I started to think about some of the other things that we did, like visiting the goats on the roof place. And here the goats aren't quite on the roof. And then there was this really peculiar structure next door to the goats on the roof that I found really amusing. And my kids decided that they wanted to visit a petting farms. And while they were petting the animals, I waited outside and did some sketches off the things that they had lying around there, and they had rather an interesting collection. The sun there made an appearance along with that strange structure and the goats in the second piece that I made here. And then there are those tall, tall, tall trees in Cathedral Groves. Most of them are 300 years old, but the oldest are over 800 years old, and I mean they really are magnificent. It's a little hard to get a full impression of how truly tall they are until you stand beside them. And that was the inspiration for this next piece. And of course, I could not forget the beach. And when you're on Vancouver Island, you're never far from the beach. So of course, I had to include some beach scenes in my piece here. Don't you love this pattern that the tide has made in the sand? I just thought this was very cool. And I fully intended to create a piece that replicated that pattern, but that's not what my piece wanted to be. So this is what it ended up looking like. And that ever-present water, sky, island view that you find everywhere on Vancouver Island, like this view from the ferry and the view at Long Beach. Of course, they found a place in my stitchy bits as well. So eventually I'm going to sew this piece together, but for now I am busy planning my next trip. Any guesses where I might be going and what I might be doing? And I will see you again soon. Bye for now.